Hey, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Howie Jacobson. My day job is as a coach, helping people live better lives. I coach executives and leaders, I coach entrepreneurs, and I coach civilians who are looking to improve their lives, their health, their relationships. Basically, it allows me to do what I didn't think was possible, which is to help people completely erase bad habits and different ways of being, erase negative feelings and replace them with positive ones, rather than just help people develop new strategies to compete with the old ones or new thought patterns to debate the old thought patterns. And I'm looking for people to work with. And I have reduced my rates a lot so that I can just get as much practice in as I can. So I am going to raise them back up to my normal fees, but right now I just need a lot of practice and feedback, and I have teachers and mentors. So if you're interested in getting my best coaching, better than I've ever done, at a big discount, email me, hj@plantyourself.com. So let's get on with the show. All right, I have to be careful about what I promise because you guys listen and remember and hold me to it. So when I published the first interview with Veronica Monet about 2 months ago, I said it was going to be the first of 3 because there was so much we had to cover. And, you know, life happened and we moved to Spain and people kept reminding me, hey, where is the rest of those conversations? So Veronica kindly agreed to get back on the Zoom, or the Riverside actually, with me to talk about the second topic that we were going to cover, which is internal family systems, the modality that she uses as part of her coaching as the chief evangelist of the shame-free zone, helping people recover from shame, loosen the secrets that have been supporting shame, and moving from the darkness into the light. So this conversation, we start with a recapitulation of some of the most interesting bits of Veronica's story, and then she explains what internal family systems is, where it comes from, what the terminology is, and how we can begin to use it to heal ourselves. So I'm really looking forward to your reactions to this one, so let's do it. Without further ado, Veronica Monet, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Howie, I'm really glad to be here, and I'm still a little bit mind blown that you're talking to us from Spain.
Sí, claro. That's all I got.
Okay, fine. I'm sorry, I only do the Spanish version here in America. Muy poquito español.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think the tricky thing is, you know, when I did learn Spanish, it was like Latin American Spanish, but here they do the lisp for like the C before an I or an E. So I live in Barcelona.
Whoa. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, you're going to be stimulating that brain of yours, and that will be good for you. We're always supposed to be learning new things. So good luck.
Yep. And I'm finding myself like becoming very dramatic in my like facial expressions and sign language, almost like I have to be a mime or a clown because I don't have words.
As long as you're not shouting.
No, I know that shouting doesn't help. You know, they shout at me.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't understand.
Right.
Know, but they don't get any slower. Like that would help.
Wouldn't it? Yeah, but in time they'll realize you're not an annoying American tourist, and I'm sure things will work out great.
Yeah, we live in sort of a tourist town, and so there's like a gift shop, and the gift shop does sell mugs that say "I'm a fucking tourist," like on the mug. So,
did you get one?
So I did not. I've resisted, claiming that fully. I feel like, one thing I'm struggling with in Spanish is there's 2 forms of the verb for the present tense that relate to either permanence or temporary. Like, I'm here would be like estoy, Like, but you know, soy is like a more permanent, like I am this.
Ah.
So it's a very interesting construct that my brain's never had to really like, you know, I'm late, I'm bald, you know, I'm a spiritual
Yeah.
being, like they're all the same am. But
Wow.
you have to
And
decide here, like how permanent
now
is this thing?
the Spanish that I know genders everything. So there's
Yep.
feminine and masculine version of everything. Is that how it is there too?
Yeah. Yes, although it's less. The other language that I learned is Hebrew, which genders more. So
Interesting.
Hebrew genders verbs, which I don't think Spanish does.
Oh my Lord. Okay.
Right. So Spanish
Well,
genders nouns and adjectives.
yes,
So this is like
exactly.
slightly less. You know, like we talk about, you
I,
know,
di-
pronouns and issues
I
here
didn't know
in
that you
English.
speak Hebrew.
Speak is probably a strong word, but I learned it.
Okay. You learned it. Yeah. I know very little about that language, but I named my dog that she died a long time ago. But a long time ago, I had a dog, and I named her Shekinah, which is the
Ah,
feminine version of God in Hebrew.
yep. The presence. Yep.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Dogs are that, right?
They
They're
sure
pretty
are.
pure divinity, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Oh. All right. So with
Yeah.
that segue
Yeah.
into lofty lofty realms. So I had a bunch of people who were like clamoring for you to come back because we remember we ended the last interview with me saying, "I hope you'll come back and talk about what we were going to talk about because your life was too
Right?
damn interesting to stop."
Well, and I really had,
So
I've been asked about aspects of my life for years by a lot of journalists and television personalities. And I really enjoyed our interview, Howie, because you took it so personal and deep.
oh,
And we had a chance to really develop the topic instead of just titillating viewing audiences, which I'm so used to that nauseating platform. Yeah. And I
yeah,
appreciate
no, I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard not to be a titillator.
Well, especially if you know it's going to get you clicks and likes and all that. Yeah, I know.
Right.
But
I mean, it actually came up in an interview I did last week, a very different situation and topic. It's with a woman who's a homelessness activist who is
right.
herself unhoused. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
asking, you know, she lives in her car with her 7-year-old
Yeah.
son, and I was asking questions about that, and I found myself like sort of checking myself, like this isn't about like I wanted to like really
Yeah.
understand and kind of paint a picture of, you know, the humanity that we don't often see
Yes.
necessarily when we look at someone who lives that life. But I also found myself like not wanting to veer into like a form of like poverty titillation,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right.
you know? So I
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that, as I think we want
Yeah.
the goal here is to tell, you know, full empowering stories that help everyone live a better life.
Well, I think you do a good job of that. And thank you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
So IFS, you introduced me to internal family systems. You told me to
Yes, I
go, you know, check out this book, which led me to like this entire world of experiential therapy, which I'm adapting into coaching. So my whole life is different because of that offhand comment that you made about something that I had, you know, dismissed more or less.
Yeah.
But this is the work that you do is largely based on IFS, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's work that I'm doing in my own personal life. It's the backbone of the memoir that I'm currently writing. And it's certainly the kind of coaching. I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach that I bring to my clients. So I work with a lot of I guess you'd call them sensitive issues. So I have clients who are still perpetrating some domestic violence, not real serious. If it's real serious, that really needs to go to law enforcement, and I can't be of assistance there. But people do things that they don't consider domestic violence. The culture at large doesn't consider it domestic violence, but I know it is because I'm well versed on the topic. So things like verbal abuse, blocking your partner when they want to leave the room, chasing them throughout the house to tell, you're going to listen to me, you're going to listen to me, slamming doors, breaking things. Those are all ways of creating emotional terror. And a lot of people do stuff like that, push, threaten, I'm taking the kids. So I work with that kind of domestic violence. The stuff most people are into denial about, and it gets unfortunately normalized in a lot of film and television. I also work with sexual assault survivors. I have a lot of clients who come to me because they're having sexual difficulty. I give them exercises to really connect energetically with their sexual selves. And oftentimes what'll surface is an awareness that they have been assaulted or molested as a child. So yeah, IFS is just really a powerful tool for healing trauma. And I first read about it in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. Fabulous book. It's dense, and maybe it's a little more geared towards those of us who consider ourselves clinicians. But I have to say, it was a New York Times best-selling book for about 5 years. So obviously,
I think
the public really liked it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got that pretty cover.
The CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, pretty common. Dialectical therapy, pretty common. None of those actually have a proven track record with trauma like EMDR and IFS do. And, I am the shame-free zone. That's what it says on my office door, Veronica's shame-free zone. It's a place where people get to go deep. Sometimes it's a little bit like in confessional. They come in and tell me stuff they're going to go to their graves with as a secret, except for telling me about it. But mostly it's about me helping them get connected to their feelings and unpacking that in a way that brings clarity. So the interesting thing about IFS for me is it's a tool that helps me amplify a gift that I was born with. And the gift that I have is that when I'm speaking to another person, I can feel all those different parts. And oftentimes it would be confusing because people say, they tell me one thing speaking from one part, then they tell me another thing speaking from yet another part. Then a manager part would come in and tell me what they think and want. And I go, well, that's just part of you that feels that way. I've heard you say this. I've heard you say that. All of that stuff's true too. And I don't want to lose those parts of you. And at that point, I was basically operating off of a pretty standard script of parenting your inner child, which has been around for decades. But when I discovered IFS, it was like, this helps me understand why these parts sometimes polarize and what their different roles are. So you got the firefighters and the managers and protectors of various different types. And then behind those are the exiles. And we'll get into the weeds there and explain what all that is in a minute. But I just kind of wanted to give you an overview. I was so excited when I found IFS because then it gave me a language for what I had been experiencing all along, which was that people are kind of like a collection of parts and they don't agree with each other all the time. In fact, rarely. So it's also an obstacle to people meeting their goals because a part of them will set a goal and another part will say, I don't think so. So then they wind up kind of stymied. And when you get clear on all those... Yeah, go ahead, Howie. I know I go on and on.
So there's a lot to unpack, but I just want to kind of bring it back to what you were first saying about what the forms of domestic violence that we don't think of as domestic violence. I've got to say that I've done some of those things.
Me too.
Right.
I've done worse,
but I've done, I would never have considered it violence. I was, the way I was when I was doing any of those things, like following someone around the house and like, I need to be heard, was doing it not because I was trying to protect something or I was desperate. Like I wasn't doing it out of, any sort of conscious plan to like intimidate or like I was terrified. Right. And trying to do those things to get something. And so like one of the things that I've, before we even get into like the IFS like system and the lingo, but there's this basic core idea that everything we do makes sense. And I think that must be a very healing message when people come to you and they're like, I'm a mess, I'm fucking crazy. And you can say, oh, well, in my world, this makes sense, and it's going to make sense to you too.
It's true. And, one of the things I was thinking is that before we get too far down this road, for those people who are clamoring for part 2 of this interview, it might be helpful. We never really quite got to I don't think we got quite into how I became a coach, but maybe we did. Maybe I missed something there. What were your thoughts on that? Should I kind of backtrack a little bit and explain that?
You know what? If we did get it, people didn't necessarily listen to that. So I think that would be a great bridge or segue or useful thing. So I would trust your gut. Okay.
Well, so I will back up just a little bit and then hang on because we're definitely going to take a deep dive into IFS. So in 2004, one of the things I wanted your viewers and listeners to know is that since I got sober in 1985, I've lived a life that was oriented around a connection to my version of a higher power. So that has been a central guiding force for me. And it was... And I know this is very controversial for a lot of people, but it's my truth and it's my path and it's my experience. For me personally, not trying to generalize this to anybody else, but for me, when I entered into this sex industry as an escort in 1989, that was in large part about me praying to my higher power for guidance. And when I exited in 2004, it was, again, very much about guidance from my higher power. And I knew that I was going to get a book deal. Now, how did I know? Sometimes I just know things, Howie. And I told my husband I'm going to get a book deal and I'm going to quit escorting and sell the house and go write a book. And he's like, that's ridiculous. You don't know that you're going to get a book deal. And I go, actually, I do. It's going to be published before I turn 45. Well, all that did happen. And the book deal didn't exist at the time, but one came into my inbox and I got an advance and my book was published by Penguin in 2005. And I transitioned into being a coach at that particular time because that was just the next thing that was supposed to happen. And I just love living this spiritually directed life. I just really wanted to share that with your viewers because then I am not stuck in a place of self-will and attachment. I'm always interested in what is the next right thing for me to do. And I had a hard time starting my coaching practice because I knew I wasn't going to, quote unquote, repent for having been in the sex industry. I wasn't going to recant. I wasn't going to dish out the narrative people wanted of somehow or another that was a big mistake, or now I've seen the light and that's why I quit. None of that was true for me, and none of that is true for me. And I've actually been coaching now for 19 years, and I was an escort for about 17. So I've been coaching longer than I was escorting.
Yeah.
But I've
So
been doing.
I bet there's some people who are, jaw hit the floor when they hear like, oh, there is a higher power that would say that that's okay. Tell me more.
Well,
Like, where can I get one of those?
I was dumbfounded too, by the way. I kept saying, this has got to be the wrong thing. This has got to be the wrong thing, set me straight here. And I just kept getting a green light. And then as I went into it, and I think this is an important piece, I realized that I was healing myself and other people. So again, this is not, this is what happens when you're an escort. This is what happened when I was an escort. And it is what happens for some people when they're an escort. And so it's kind of like if you heard the story about a doctor who just got in it for the money. And then there was a doctor who just did it because his parents wanted him to. And then there was a doctor who did it because he was really a humanitarian and he wanted to save lives. And then there was a doctor who did it just because he was really fascinated with the technology. You wouldn't really know much about doctors unless you were finding out about that particular doctor and what his motivations and character are. It's exactly the same in the sex industry. These are just people. And they have different motivations, different circumstances. In my particular case, this was about my healing and bringing healing to other people. And I really approached sexuality as a sacred calling and a sacred gift. And I still do. I am now monogamous and I've been in a relationship for 13 years. And I really love that too. And I'm glad that I got to experiment with swinging with my ex-husband. Life has all these different, iterations that we can have if we don't get too attached to what we're supposed to do, but we keep looking for the thing that enlarges and enhances our soul's journey and how that can help and heal ourselves and other people. So my perspective was very much about bringing love to people, bringing healing to people, and particularly helping to unburden shame. I think it's really sad that we're living in such a shame-based culture, and particularly when it comes around people's sexuality, there's a tremendous amount of secrecy and shame. That secrecy and shame is where the perpetrations fester and grow. And, we see this in a lot of cults. We see this in a lot of religious organizations that really demonize sexuality and then have a huge problem with sexual perpetration towards children. I just want to live in a world where adults have consensual, conscious, sexual avenues, whatever that looks like, with whomever that looks like, as long as our guiding principle is that we don't harm ourselves or each other. And a lot of stress on adults. Because as an incest survivor, I know sex can really damage and hurt. So I don't know, Hallie. That makes sense to me, but you might still have some questions. What might they be?
Well, I guess the main question is, I'm wondering, as a coach, did you feel like you were giving up some tools? Because I know, there's a lot of somatic therapists who then want to work on a psychological level, and they can't touch anymore. And how do I access their vagus nerve? How do I calm the sympathetic nervous system? How do I give them an experience of shame-free touch? And now you're a coach, and I assume you're doing a lot of it, I don't know, online but it's, at first I'm thinking about, sex worker, that's a blah, 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 and coaching is ooh, but the way you're describing, there seem to be, if they're both healing modalities, and I'm wondering, did it feel like you'd lost some tools from your tool belt?
Yes, which is why I'm really glad that I refer out to sexological body workers.
Gotcha.
So I don't touch my clients except to give them a very platonic hug before and after their sessions. I touch their hearts emotionally and energetically, but I don't touch them physically. However, I do have sexological body workers. They don't work for me. They've got their own companies, but I refer out. Just as I also sometimes refer my clients to licensed therapists who do EMDR, and also some licensed therapists in states where it's legal who do shamanic journeys with MDMA and psilocybin. I'm not trying to be the person who does it all. I think I focus on my gifts, which is really about isolating people's emotions and parts and bringing it up to the surface so they can see it. And that happened a lot when I was an escort. It was interesting because when I was an escort, the focus is so much on the sexual healing. And yet I had all of these psychic events where I could tell by touching people so much about their life and about their internal journey and landscape. And some of those people found it a little disturbing. They're like, well, I didn't come here for that. I was like, but yeah, there's an untapped gift that I really want to be able to use too. So kind of, yeah.
I'm imagining that, as a coach, people come to me for things that they want, and I know that what they need is different. So we have to kind of play a little bit of a marketing game.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm imagining that the difference in what people think they want when they go to an escort, it might be very different from what your heart is called to provide.
Well, yeah. And then some people get it. I know people like to make fun of men, but there's a lot of sensitive, intelligent men out there, which is one of the gifts that came to me from being an escort, because I really hated men when I went into the business. I was just, I'll take their money and I'm never going to work for their companies again because I've been passed over for promotions and raises and sexually harassed in the office. And I was just so over men. And I had a girlfriend, but my male clients opened my heart. And I was like, wow, these are people. These are people, and they've got deep emotions. And sometimes they would share things with me they wouldn't share with anybody else. And, they might walk in hardened and tough guy, and they might walk out that way. But while they were there for an hour or how many ever hours they spent with me, they went to some pretty deep places and oftentimes cried. I felt very privileged to help some men in kind of a muse mentor capacity where they got new jobs or promotions or raises. And it was really about helping them build their self-esteem. But that was not the stated goal that these people had. It's just what I brought as somebody who approached this from a sacred healing art. Yeah.
Is there a gap now between what people think they want from you as a shame-free coach and healing and what you provide?
Great question, Howie. Absolutely. Because some people think that I'm just a sexologist and I'm going to give them all these tips on various different sexual positions and, polyamory and swinging and that kind of stuff. Like they see me as the lady who's going to free them so they don't have to feel guilty anymore. And it's not actually what I'm about. Shame and guilt are two different things. Guilt's actually a pretty handy human response because it helps us understand when we have violated our ethics and also the boundaries of other people. So if somebody wants to come in and get permission to lie and cheat on their partner, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't help people do that. If what you want to do is surface some of your desires and feelings and be transparent with your partner, maybe change the terms of the relationship so that there can be an open sexual understanding, well, then we can talk about that, but it's always going to have to be consensual. It's always going to have to be in the context if you can't force your partner to agree to things that don't fit for them. So I'm much more focused on the idea of freeing us from shame. So it's okay that you want certain things and feel certain things, but it's not always okay to act on them. Yeah.
All right. So
Was that too much, Howie?
no. I'm trying to. Do you feel like you've brought us kind of up to speed on the transition to
I think
coaching?
so, and that's. I mean, actually, we could just segue into what does IFS do about shame and guilt?
Well, maybe could you start with just sort of the IFS 101?
Sure. So,
Thanks.
we've got parts, and I don't know. Do we have some way to share on the screen here? Because I don't.
No one's ever asked that before. Let's
Yeah.
see. Share. I think at the bottom, do you see a little share with a rectangle with an up arrow in it?
Yeah.
That might work.
Shares.
And this would be a good time to tell people that this podcast has a YouTube channel.
Uh-huh.
And I shaved today, so I'm looking smart.
Yes, you are. Well, it's window. Okay. There we go. Here we go. All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to explain it to those people who aren't watching us and are just listening.
Beautiful.
But basically, IFS, Internal Family Systems, has got self at the center. And some of us already have kind of a concept of that because we talk about our higher self. And we know we've all had that experience of being in self because we have access to these 8 qualities, which I'll bring up a screen for that in a minute too. But they include things like clarity and compassion and calm, creativity, confidence. And when you've been in that place, it feels so good, but then something takes you out of it. And oftentimes it's some kind of traumatic event. Now, let's just for a minute talk about trauma. Yes, there's trauma, like, okay, you were in a car wreck or somebody raped you or somebody robbed you, or you were, abused as a child. And yet there's also traumatic events. So you can think about this like you startle a deer. On some level, you've totally engaged that deer's amygdala. It's going into fight, flight, or freeze. So maybe you startled it and it just stops dead in its tracks, or maybe you startled it and it took off running. You have that same brain. You've got that same amygdala that's going to do fight, flight, or freeze. And it could be something like a sonic boom, or a weather event. So it may not in your mind qualify as, oh, that was trauma or I've been traumatized. But on some level, yeah, you have. And what it does is it'll push into previous events that maybe were more bigger traumas. So car backfires and you have served time in the military and then you go into PTSD just because of car backfiring. Those sort of things happen to all of us on some level where we smell something or hear something or feel something or see something that triggers something that happened in our childhood that was, in fact, traumatic. So it kicks us out of self.
Right. So the idea that I think I'm understanding from this work is that it's basically the past superimposing itself on the present, so that like whatever you're seeing or hearing or experiencing, it's coming from a memory that's telling you what this all means, as opposed to being sort of purely in touch with what's happening right now. Does that sound?
I would say that's very well put. Yes. It's very well put. And what's happening is that we've got these firefighters, managers. For just a minute, let's ignore the exiles because they're kind of behind the managers and the firefighters. The thing to know about managers and firefighters is they're both protectors. So protectors have your best interest at heart. They want to protect you. That's what they do. And a manager oftentimes is doing that from the perspective of kind of, let's be logical about this and find a solution. Let's just handle this. And the firefighter is kind of like, this is not happening, and I'm going to do anything I can to interrupt it. So if you think about if your house was on fire, the firefighters would break your windows, knock your door down, and spray water all over the place and destroy your furniture. But at least they'd save the house. So your internal firefighters do something similar. They may create a lot of havoc. They might actually be incredibly destructive, but their attempt is to save you.
Do you have any examples?
Sure. Let's just pull some from my own life. In the past, my firefighters would sometimes perpetrate violence because the last thing they wanted to do was for me to be in a situation where I was being violated violently. So they were trying to preempt that by being what they saw as defending me from potential violence by perpetrating it first. And so, one of the reasons I work with people who have domestic violence is I am in recovery as both a survivor and a perpetrator. And I make no secret about that. I think it's really important for us, if we're going to be coaches, coach what you have lived. So you can model for people what it's like to leave those behaviors behind. Working with those firefighters, I have to let them know that I actually have self now. And with myself, I don't have to do these destructive behaviors that they created on my behalf to try to save me from a burning house. I know they have the best of intentions. I know why they're there. I love them. I appreciate them. But gradually over time, I can give them something else to do so they don't have to do those destructive behaviors. A manager can be a
lot of people who are listening to this, the podcast started out as sort of a food-based, plant-based podcast. And so a lot of folks who have sort of eating issues, that's pretty much a firefighter.
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, well, let's do it because I have an eating disorder. I have anorexia. So when a traumatic event happens for me, what'll happen, so something triggers a trauma. Maybe it's a fear of abandonment because my father rejected me when I was 19 and disowned me. Maybe it's the fear of being confined and controlled because until my father rejected me and disowned me, that's what he did. So either one of those fears can throw me into my eating disorder. And my eating disorder is kind of, it's under the radar in a lot of ways. I don't even know it's happening until it's happened. And it's just a matter of waiting too long to eat and then not eating enough. And running off of adrenaline. And the adrenaline is basically keeping me on high alert, and it also makes me happy. So instead of being afraid, I feel excited and energized and all these wonderful feelings. And it takes a while when I tip over and crash because I didn't feed myself enough food. And I realize, oops, I did it again. And then I go back, oh, yeah, there we go. So there's this firefighter that kicks in by saying we're just not going to eat. And it has a lot of different agendas. One is a sense of control. Other things on the outside that I can't control can trigger this response that, well, at least I can control not eating. And then that makes my organism feel more powerful and calm because at least something's under control. The other thing is that if I'm not eating, I don't have as deep an experience of my emotions. So maybe I can't connect with the terror that just got triggered. And so its intention is to help me continue to be functional so that I have pure calm on the outside and together on the outside and like I'm handling things just fine until I tip over into the collapse around having drained yet again my adrenal glands. So obviously you could apply this to overeating, as obviously I don't have that issue. I've got the anorexia thing. But for somebody who's overeating, if they could stuff the feelings, stuff the food, it's a way of feeling comforted and soothed so that you don't have to experience these really horrible sensations, these emotions that are really painful. And that's oftentimes we are trying to avoid the painful feelings. And when we're children, these painful feelings can feel like they're going to kill us. And we don't have a lot of recourse as children. We don't have much control as children. So then our bodies become this locus of control. And finding those firefighters, so like in my case, talking with the firefighter that doesn't want to eat, that thinks that that's in our best interest, and updating its files is a really important IFS principle. How do we get to know this firefighter, its agenda, what it's doing, why it's doing it, appreciate it, love it, accept it, welcome it. Every time you find a firefighter that you hate, that's a part of you that hates it, because self would only have compassion for this part. And this is a hard thing to learn, because we've got some very powerful managers that want to get in and then control the firefighters.
So let's talk about them. So when you find a firefighter and you're like, ugh, you've actually found a manager as well.
Yeah.
So what are managers?
The manager is trying to keep the whole system in check and functioning well. I experience my managers as being very logical and kind of detached from the emotions and just charting out a course, like I actually was a manager in a former life. When I was 7 years in corporate America, I was an office manager, department manager. So you're always trying to institute strategies for the better, for the whole organism kind of thing. You've got the big picture. You're looking at the big picture, and you're charting a path. Maybe you have a goal, and the managers help you figure out how you're going to reach those goals. One of the things that's really important to keep in mind about all these parts, Howie, is they want what's best for us. So it's not like we're going to banish them or destroy them or get rid of them. We are going to ask them to let us drive the bus. This is another IFS saying. Basically, just kind of imagine a school bus full of unruly kids. Those are your parts. And then you're driving the bus. But when a firefighter or a manager steps in and starts driving the bus, you're no longer driving it. So all that we want to do is we want to get to know these parts and then ask them if they would allow us to drive the bus and, keep advising us, bring us the information that they have that they want us to be looking at. It's really like having a conversation with other people that just happen to be inside of you.
Mm-hmm. So I was doing some coaching with someone and using the coherence framework that I'm learning, and sort of together we stumbled upon parts. So I then brought in what I understood of IFS and invited some conversations, and they went nowhere for a long time because the person's parts didn't want to play. They didn't want to talk. And as a coach, I've been trained to be very progress oriented. And so this was a different thing that needed to happen. And it took us both a while to figure out, how to slow down to speed up. Can you?
Howie, I have very powerful managers. And there is a place for them in my coaching practice. Absolutely. But when I start to do a IFS exercise with my clients, I've got to ask those managers to step back, because the IFS process only works if you bring self to it, which means that I've got to be curious and compassionate with their parts. if I'm not, the parts can feel that. So the basic premise is that if I have an agenda, I am not in self. Now that's a pretty tall request. If you're a coach, of course you have agendas. You're trying to get the client to the place they asked to get to. You're trying to help them meet their goals. So I think in some ways, when you are actually doing the IFS exercises, because, I'm not like just an IFS coach. I do a lot of other things, a lot of different modalities. I need to know when I'm stepping into IFS as a coach. And at that time, I've got to ask the manipulative, agenda-driven managers inside me to give me some space, to step back so that I can just bring self to this client. Because the client wants the curiosity and the compassion. That's what opens that part up. That's what gets that part to start dialoguing. And it's only once that part has kind of unburdened itself that we can make progress. But if it knows that you're bringing it, one of your own managers, it's like, hey, and I've done this too many times, Howie, manipulated somebody else's part. I think you'd be better off if you this. It's like, and sometimes it has unfortunately worked, which has been positive reinforcement for this pattern in me. But I am really working on befriending those managers and asking them to give me a little bit of space so that we can actually bring the lack of shame. When we've got this agenda, there's a way in which we are shaming people. We're kind of saying, okay, well, I like you, but I won't really like you until you change this thing.
Yeah. I had another conversation earlier today that I recorded with Philip Shepard, who's an embodiment teacher. And first thing I asked him was like, what's your definition of embodiment? And it's sort of, being in direct contact with the present while being indifferent to outcome.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because I was going to say in some ways IFS is asking us to go into a meditative space, one that is about non-attachment. Well said.
Yeah, and it sounds like just going to workshops and learning how to do the work is not going to work unless you have done the work on yourself, so that you can bring self and recognize when you're out of self and model getting back into self in front of clients.
This is, I think, one of the most sacred aspects of IFS to me, is that it's a pride leveling practice. So I have a degree in psychology, and almost all of the branches of psychology have kind of a hierarchical, ego-driven structure. And psychology was so desperate to prove itself as a quote-unquote legitimate science way back in the day that they went to great lengths to try to set up those hierarchies between the doctor and the patient. So it's very hierarchical. And here comes Richard Schwartz 40 years ago with IFS, and he just blows all of that away. And he's like saying, I have... sometimes I overeat, and I was bullied as a kid, and I, suffer from insecurities. And he's like putting his stuff out there and really working with those parts of himself. And it's very humble, really humble. And I've got the background in 12-step recovery. I guess I love the idea that we're all in this together, that we're all trying to heal together. And when I'm working with clients, there's ways in which I'm healing myself through the process too. When I am working with IFS with my therapist, and I have two, one that I do with my partner and one I do solo, I am becoming a better coach with IFS principles, because I'm learning. And, I can see when my own therapist drops the ball and it doesn't show up for me. And I learn from that and go, yeah, I do that too. I want to make sure I learned how to do that differently. But IFS actually invites IFS therapists to be more self-revealing, to share more things about themselves. That's absolutely unheard of in the field of psychology. It's beautiful.
Well, I guess, if you come from the perspective of each of us has this unsullied capital S self, then there's nothing to be proud of or ashamed of.
I tell my clients, I said, you already have the answers. I don't. I'm just here to help calm your parts down so that your big, beautiful, eternal, ancient self can speak and help drive that bus.
Yeah. So in many ways, I know it's a comprehensive theory, and I've read the book No Bad Parts, and I know there's a lot of complexity to it. But at some level, it's not a theory. It's completely atheoretical when you are in front of someone. Like you're not imposing the theory on their construction of reality and of themselves. You're allowing it to unfold and simply, holding it for them.
Yeah. You know what's great? So many people have different relationships of their parts. Some people draw their parts. And it's exciting. You get to see these beautiful pictures and these interesting visual images of their various different parts. Some people name their parts, and they'll describe what they look like to me. Some people have kind of amorphous parts, like it's just an energy here and an energy there and a bright light there and a dark mass over here. It's different for different people, and it's also different for different parts. I think it's fun and exciting to find out just how complex each and every one of us is internally. And that sense of wonder and adventure and curiosity is really that self. It's inviting us to really, I think, embrace all of ourselves. And that's another reason I love IFS, because it really is an invitation to love every part of us. Now, Richard Schwartz actually started off working with inmates who had done some horrific crimes. So that's a bit of a stretch for a lot of us to think that we would be able to talk to the parts that have committed horrific crimes and find compassion for them. But I like one of the ways that he framed this about somebody who had been caught in perpetrations, and he said he's traumatized, and that's a part that's trying to protect him, and he has to be stopped. So it's not that we don't have repercussions for bad behavior. We need that. We absolutely need that. But we also need a healing modality that's going to help everyone get well, so we can be a safer, saner society. And demonizing people actually creates more perpetrations, as does shame.
Yeah, it's kind of an uncomfortable place to be, I'm finding, to see not justification exactly, but like reasons why for everything, for everybody. Like it was easier when I could just, fucking hate people.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
You know what I mean? That there's a way in which, okay, so if there's coherence, it's like, let's say, certain ex-presidents, like you can think about like, whoa, their childhood. And,
Yes.
There's one in particular, but there's many ex-presidents who are clearly, have abused their power in various ways. And it's like, well, they have this incredible gift, and you can see, when you learn the biography, like everyone is understandable. And, well, it's not for me to forgive something that wasn't done to me, but it's almost like I can't judge. It's hard to judge people anymore.
Yes. I know. I hate that, Howie. I love judging. But I'll tell you, as long as I am capable and give myself permission of judging other people, it unfortunately pushes back on me too. And then I have parts of me that I reject and judge and literally hate. And, I'm working with that because I know that it's absolutely a fact that the more I judge and hate, the more that thing is going to persist. And if I can cultivate some compassion and curiosity about the parts that I currently hate, they are going to get to speak to me about their burdens. And in the process, they won't have to continue to do the things that I don't want them to do. So I apply that out into the world as well. What's true at the same time is that some people are not going to get into IFS therapy. They're not going to work with their parts. And so that part is going to have the power to destroy an entire nation or start a war. And, you can have the compassion for the damage that has created that individual, but they still have to be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a different energy, right? If people are going to be stopped because I'm doing my job, like I'm, basically like a traffic cop, like you don't go, right? As opposed to the kind of, the bloodlust.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Just the hate on my Twitter feed, which I have too many times hit the old heart on. Oh, I like that. That was really a good burn. And what I see in that, when I look at myself, the part of me that loves hateful messages and memes, is that I feel powerless. And that powerlessness goes back to maybe somebody in the public eye is perpetrating in a way that is reminiscent of how I was perpetrated against as a child. And so this desire for revenge and retribution and justice and judgment and all those things come into play. And the next thing you know, you got a social media feed, don't you?
Right, and which appears to be, an AI algorithm designed to amplify and provide, compound feedback for the worst of us.
Yeah, but I want to reframe that is the hurting part of us. The hurting part of us. So even in that, I don't want to judge the part of me that likes those hateful memes. I want to get to know it and see if there's some way that I can calm it down so that I can start doing other things that might be contributing to a more just world in a different way than making fun of somebody.
Right. Although, I also see and feel the urge to slap a rainbow on and just be, I think they call spiritual bypassing, where I don't want to get in touch with the part that loves to hit like and share nasty stuff. Right? Like I would rather just slap on a smiley face and pretend to be enlightened.
So that's a polarized part. Let's talk about polarized parts for a minute. Most of us have some polarized parts, and you can think of it like this. Let's go back to food, okay? So I'm going to stop eating animal products. And then there's another part that's like, well, but what will grandma think when I go to her house for Thanksgiving? And what about that favorite hamburger joint that I go to? Or, that part's kind of running interference, thinking about all these other things. And that part has a really good point, because what it's trying to do is remind you of the social connections that you have and how important those are to you. And then the other part's kind of like, I don't care. My health is what matters to me. My ethical relationship with this planet is what matters to me. And I'm just not at all suggesting that vegan is the way to go here. I'm just taking it as an example. that might apply for some people's food choices. It's that place that so many of us live in around life in general, where we've got a part that's trying to bring to our attention, this really matters. And then we've got another part that's like, no, this really matters. And so you flip-flop back and forth between these two agendas. And it makes you feel crazy. Like I can't make up my mind, or I can't stick to my resolutions, or, it's so confusing because I want to do this and then I want to do that. And that's a big complaint that I get. I'm sure you do too in your coaching practice, is people coming in, I can't figure out whether I should do this or do that. That's almost always polarized parts, and they are working against each other and not on your behalf. So first thing you want to do is go in and meet each one of them. So the part that you were talking about there, that's spiritual bypassing to me, is I have that part too. And she wants very much for me not to be a bitter person. She wants me to be kind. She wants me to be loving. She wants me to be cheerful. She wants me to look on the positive side. I think those are all really great agendas. The problem is when she's driving the bus, when she's in charge, then the other voice in me that also has great advice doesn't get to talk. And it gets frustrated, and pretty soon it yanks the steering wheel away from her, and it starts driving the bus, and now I'm flip-flopping back and forth. The other side of me would say, you're an activist. You have to stop these things. You can't stand by idly and just let this stuff happen. It's not okay. Oming your way through this is not going to change the world for better. Okay. I also think that part has a great point. So now what can I do? How can I resource myself so that both parts get to advise myself? And I just have to be able to talk to them. Sometimes what I'll say is, you have a great point. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. And I am in self, and I think I'm not the little girl you think I am. How old do you think I am anyway? And sometimes that part will say, well, you're 15 and look what you did. And I'll go, actually, no, I'm an adult woman now. And I've had years of therapy and recovery. I think I might be able to handle this better than you think I could. What do you think? Give me a little bit of space just to try it out. And then that part will relax a little bit and like, okay, let's see what you got. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Richard Schwartz talks about self-leadership.
Yeah.
Which, it's a fun buzzword that you could throw around in corporate settings, but he reads something very specific about the self acting like a confident leader, like the alpha of a dog pack, where everybody else knows, okay, this is cool, right? Humans don't really. I remember, watching a lot of Cesar Millan a while back, and he was dogs would never follow an unstable leader. Humans do all the time, but like dogs only follow the calm, confident one. And so it's kind of asking you, can you find the self, identify with it, and then start practicing leading the other parts, so that they say, okay, so I have a role here, but it's not to be in charge. That's not an appropriate role for me.
Yes. And I think maybe this would be a good time for me to share I'm going to share this. Where the heck did it go? Okay, not the screen, a window. Here we go. I want to share those 8 C's of self-leadership. Since you brought that up, I think it's just a really great time to talk about this. So the 8 C's of IFS. Self has these 8 characteristics. And if you are in that, if that's what you're feeling, then you know that's self. It actually took me a long time. I had to be in IFS therapy for about a year before I discovered myself. It was so buried under protectors and managers, firefighters. I couldn't get to it. And eventually I located it. And then I was like, oh, that's self. It feels really good to be in self. It's calm, and it has clarity, and it has curiosity and compassion. It has confidence. It has courage. It's creative, and it loves connection. So I kind of have to scroll through that, but let me know if you need me to scroll back up for it. I just want to make sure everybody gets to see those eight C's, because I just think they're so beautiful, and it's a beautiful place to inhabit. It is not a pious spiritual bypass place where everything's great. Having compassion does not mean that you co-sign bad behavior. And there's clarity is going to preclude you going into denial and pretending that something isn't happening. But being calm about whatever's happening is really key. This is a place then where our higher wisdom gets to kick in, and we got to have like these intuitive knowings about the next right action for us. Yeah. So I'm gonna stop the share here.
I just wrote down those 3 words, and next right action. That's kind of the secret of life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because it's
like
moment by moment.
If you can just do that, then you've done everything.
Yeah, and I definitely love my parts. So the part that wants me to be positive and happy, I love that part. I need that part. And the part that wants me to be an angry activist with righteous rage, I love that part too. Finding my balance with all the parts is really key. Now, Howie, one thing we haven't talked about is those exiles. So exiles are like your inner children who are a lot of times kind of stuck in deep freeze. They're hiding. They're not real accessible to you. And they usually have a manager and or a firefighter that's standing in front of them so that you can't get to them. Being able to contact those exiles connects you to your original pain points, usually something that happened in your childhood that was very traumatic at the time. We all have trauma. Some of it is also called a legacy burden. A legacy burden is handed down from another generation. Maybe somebody in your family suffered in the Holocaust. Maybe somebody in your family went to prison. Maybe somebody in your family was raped. And science has proven through epigenetics that travels through our DNA out 7 generations. So good luck finding a family tree that doesn't have trauma in it 7 generations back. You're going to find trauma.
Yeah.
So that's in you. And then there's the training that comes with the family of origin too. These ways of coping with the trauma, denying it or acting it out, carrying it forward. In my family, the huge trauma was pedophilia. And that was carried forward from generation to generation. In some families, it's alcoholism or drug addiction, or financial insecurity. Those sort of things get carried forward a lot of times, and so then those are legacy burdens you want to work with. But once you are able to calm down your managers and your firefighters, you get access to the exiles, and you really just want to go back and reclaim them and love them because they're little kids and they really need to have you as the parent who's there for them now. And all of this is just about integrating us so that we aren't all off in different directions, not understanding ourselves and doing behaviors that we go, why did I do that? Why do I feel that way? It's like you're in touch with your actions and your feelings in a way that makes sense. And meeting your exiles is a real exercise of compassion I find usually when I'm meeting an exile, that's kind of the number one ask is, can I be compassionate and really allow them to tell me about their pain? Yeah.
Yeah, because I've looked at, some qualities that I had as a child that I can still feel get triggered, and I feel nothing but, ugh. Like, oh, that's so gross. That's so needy. That's so whiny and annoying. The challenge of, okay, well, there's this, then that's not the self, right?
That would be
there's some manager that's like, yeah, go ahead.
Manager, it's a protector. I don't know if it's a firefighter or a manager, but it's definitely a protector. And it has a really valuable thing that it brought in. Probably as you got older, it was kind of like saying, get yourself together. And it was trying to protect you from being bullied or some other kind of loss. So then you have to talk to that protector first and ask it if it could trust you yourself to talk with the exile that it thinks is all whiny and trust that we're not going to become all whiny. The whole point here is that we're just bringing compassion and love to all the parts.
Right. So for someone who's listening to this, who's interested, so obviously one step is to find a coach or a therapist who's familiar with IFS. For folks for whom that's out of reach right now, how would you suggest people begin to integrate this wisdom in helpful ways?
I think it's incredibly valuable to watch the man who invented this, Richard Schwartz, work it in videos. And there are videos on the IFS website, but I'll tell you, I'm working my way through a 2-hour interview with Richard Schwartz that Rich Roll did on his podcast.
Okay.
And I'm loving it. I'm just loving it. It's one of the best that I've seen of Richard Schwartz. And
all right, well, I'll throw that in the show notes.
Yeah, Rich Roll's podcast.
Rich has introduced me a lot of good stuff over the years. So
it's great. It's great. And of course, the books, like you mentioned, No Bad Parts. That's a great place to start. There's some IFS workbooks that you can purchase online as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so if there's one or two that you like that you'd recommend, you maybe could send it to me later, and I'll throw those in the show notes as well.
I will. Yeah.
Great. And if people are drawn to working with you, are you taking clients? Do you work globally or just in person?
Globally. I'm taking them globally,
How can we get in touch with you?
Best way is Veronica at theshamefreezone.com.
Okay. So the Shame-Free Zone, there's a the in front of it?
Or without. Either one will come through. I own both domains.
Okay.
So. Yeah. Okay,
so I'll put all that in the show notes, and I hope this I hope this helps people as much as it helped me to begin with. Just simply have perspective on my own behaviors and say, like, okay, this isn't just like it might be a trick, it might be a game or a construct, but so helpful to be able to be the observer rather than to be the hot mess.
Yes. What I like about it, probably more than anything, is this deepening compassion for myself and connection. So compassion and connection are two of those 8 characteristics of self. And I just like finding out that being connected to myself is actually not as scary as I thought it would be. That I actually can love myself and even go so far as to like myself, so that it feels different in here. It feels integrated. It feels whole. And then the way I move through challenges, the way I move through life and my connections with others just feels so much more embodied and present. Yeah. So it's a real gift, and I'm still learning, Howie. There's so much to learn. There's so much to keep trying to refine. So right now, the big assignment is I'm working with 2 polarized parts. I have many polarized parts, but right now I'm working with 2 very specific. And I've got a manager who wants to get in there and logically figure it all out and set everybody straight. And I'm going to have to work with that manager too.
All right. Sounds like maybe not fun necessarily, but rich.
Rich and rewarding. Yeah.
Well, Veronica Monet, thank you for being so generous with your time, for agreeing to come back for this second conversation, and for all the work you're doing to promote healing and banish shame from the world.
Thank you, Howie, for your expansive, open mind. One of the things that I love about talking with you is I feel you accepting and loving all the parts of me. And there are a lot of different parts to me and to my story. And I don't feel any hesitation to be able to knit those together in a cohesive whole and see me as a whole human being. And that is incredibly rare.
Oh, good. I guess my hope for myself is after extending it to you, I can begin to give that to myself too.
I have to feel that way when I'm working with my clients. I get these downloads from my higher self and my higher power, and I'm going, that's a great idea. I should try that.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. I hope we will stay in touch and continue these conversations. And I will look forward to that.
I look forward to it too. Thank you, Howie. Appreciate you.
And that's a wrap. You can find the show notes for today's episode at plantyourself.com/564. So today I'm recording this on August 23rd, Wednesday. It is Fiesta Mayor here in the town where I'm living. We've had booms and marching bands and people walking down the street playing sort of bagpipey instruments and other people with drums. And it's just getting louder and louder and more crowded. So I'm going to try to sneak this recording in before it becomes too much of a tumult to be able to have any kind of audio quality. I'm looking forward to it. It's supposed to start tonight with fireworks and a procession of an icon of St. Bartholomew from the church around town. People are boarding up all of the glass windows and storefronts, and hilariously, a lot of them, especially the older, more iconic buildings, are covering them with like these vinyl drop cloths that are photographs of what's underneath them. So you have to look twice and realize you're not looking at the doorway with the sign next to it or the window with the shutters, but you're looking at a photograph of it that's covering it to keep it from getting damaged, because apparently over the next 2 days they're going to have these giant firecrackers coming out of giant dragons. Oh, you can start to hear some of the merriment going on. And we're expecting a couple 100,000 people to descend on this small town over the next 2 days. So if you're listening to this and you're sort of quietly out in nature, enjoying the self and the peace and quiet, send some of it my way, because I'm sure it's going to be amazing. It's also going to be a little bit overwhelming. So movement news, I kind of blew my knee out a little bit. I don't know whether it was a combination or just overdoing it, but clay court tennis with shoes that aren't that grippy, I think might have been the final straw. So I'm just resting it. I've done about 2 hours of Qigong, very gentle stuff, and just walking around slowly and being very mindful going upstairs so that I turn my right leg out so as not to bother the knee too much. And that's about it. So I'll report next week on how the next couple of days goes. And I wish you all the best. Be well, my friends.